8-9 minutes before the time stated as the time of the publication, or starting time of the publication of this edition. It says on the banners, but this is a like introduction that is in need of being given adequately. Today, the events in Pakistan about the Supreme Court, about the Election Commission, were kind of publicized extensively, and the details of the rejection of the Election Commission's so-called probe into Imran Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party have been examined and rebutted throughout the day in the mainstream media in Pakistan during Tuesday, the 2nd of August 2022. Now, in the London Financial Times, which we have renamed Financial Crimes, attack on Imran Khan and the Tehreek-e-Insaf party about 3-4 days ago, the Financial Crimes came across as an agency for Narendra Modi of India or other hostile elements that wanted to see Pakistan struggle in establishing democracy. What the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, led by Imran Khan, has been doing is to create an atmosphere that is legitimate and natural and is compatible with the temperament and the experience of the ordinary people in Pakistan, so that the ordinary people of Pakistan can engage in democratic activities without having to give up extreme amounts of their own hard-earned kind of resources, because Pakistan has got a very large number of people who are in poverty, in hunger. And Imran Khan's party has always condemned the Election Commission. That condemnation has nothing whatsoever to do with the Election Commission being describable as the watchdog, which was the Financial Crimes called it in its original piece about 3-4 days ago. The Tehreek-e-Insaf has spent more time during the day on Tuesday, the 2nd of August 2022, than any of the agencies of the Sharif and Zardari crooked families have done. One reason, quite apart from the fact that they are short of evidence, the Election Commission really are short of evidence, credible evidence, legitimate evidence, real evidence that will have to be produced in defending the Tehreek-e-Insaf allegations against the Election Commission. The Financial Crimes appears to have been used as a stooge by the Indian kind of agencies and others who want to deny Pakistan the right to stabilize democratically and to defend its democratic values and to deliver Pakistan के इंसाफ. पाकिस्तान का मतलब क्या? ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह. तेरी मेरी और तेरे मेरे मतलब क्या? Relationship is रिश्ता क्या? ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह. This is all very new. In fact, it is so upsetting to the West that they will do anything to undermine, sabotage the return of the Tehreek-e-Insaf to party, democratically established, democratically legitimized power in Pakistan. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is a party we are observing and reporting on or commenting on from a distance. We have absolutely no contact with them. We have absolutely no intention to have any contact with them. And we shall never have any contact with them. The main thing we are doing in the literally public domain is to share with anyone allowed, loudly share the experience of having to try to travel on the particular kind of platform. Now we are going to start at 22:30 GMT in the next 3 minutes, but before that, let me say that we shall continue to discuss as many items in this edition as it is possible. And we don't expect the participant, Kutubuddin from Bangladesh, to successfully link up or enter the studio. But if he does by chance, then we shall, as soon as he appears, if he does appear, that is a big if, then we shall switch to speaking mainly in the Siloti language. Until then, the language spoken would be in English, the English language. Now, what has happened in Pakistan during Tuesday, the 2nd of August 2022, has not been fundamentally original or new or different. It has got only one topic that the Tehreek party's leadership had to choose, and that was to do with a statement that has been published in the name of or at the behest of the Pakistan Election Commission. Now, the main big question, the big caveat, the reservation that Imran Khan and the Tehreek-e-Insaf party have had, and have been doing this by daily repeating this, against the Election Commission is there is a corrupt outfit. Crooks in the Pakistan Election Commission have been controlling the Election Commission, sabotaging democracy, undermining democracy, and failing to bring into use some technological devices that India and Bangladesh have been using, according to Imran Khan, that makes it faster for the votes to be counted and makes it almost fraud proof, theft proof for the cast votes to be distorted and misallocated and so on. So the evidential, the fact-based assault on the corrupt Pakistan Election Commission has continued by Imran Khan and his colleagues during most of the proceedings held on Tuesday, the 2nd of August 2022. We shall return to that in due course again for further topical updates. Now, we are going to talk about, this is 23:30 GMT, 22:30 GMT and 23:30 UK local time. We have got a piece in the Times today, in other papers as well, but in the Times today we have got a piece. It is headlined, "Naysayers Get Revenge After Pony Becomes Mayor." Now, this is one mayor that we are absolutely pleased to endorse, and that is the mayor called Patrick. Now, Patrick is a Shetland pony. Patrick is a Shetland pony called Patrick, who was made an unofficial mayor of a Devon village and he has now been kicked out of the pub garden where he meets his public. And local people suspect there has been bad intention to kind of deny Patrick the Shetland pony his sport. Last month, Patrick was given a chain of office in the village of Cockington near Torquay in Devon in a ceremony involving Kevin Foster, the Tory MP of the Torquay area, and councillors. It followed a public campaign to recognize the impact he has had on the area. Now, apparently, Patrick is a very well liked, well loved pet for the area. But our concern is to highlight the fact that Patrick has been voted mayor for the village as a symbolic gesture. And following that, the local council, what is the council called? It's a council in the area, the local area council, has actually ordered that Patrick should be ousted from the premises, the pub, where he meets his public. That is the caption in the Times. And the caption here in the picture, this says, Patrick was sworn in after a public petition in Devon. And they say that Patrick, who works as a therapy pony, visiting hospitals and mental health wards, has earned the village worldwide attention because of his fondness for Guinness at the Drum Inn. So this is a very likable, approachable, and appreciable little Shetland pony who is doing absolutely good things for the people and the needy and the vulnerable. Isn't it typical that such a person as the Shetland pony Patrick, instead of being congratulated and supported and lauded, has been made the target of attacks by the local council, thus emphasizing the fact in our general context that councils are corrupt. Of course, we say the Tower Hamlets Council is more corrupt than the other councils. That is true. But that doesn't mean that the other councils are not corrupt at all, because all the councils in England and the occupied parts of the country of Cornwall have actually, I'll rephrase that. Let's find the name of the council. Let's look at it. Look at the internet for the information, because it is easier sometimes. The internet has got several pieces on Patrick. Now let's see if we can locate the one that I was trying to read offline in the main hard copy of the Times of Tuesday, the 2nd of August. Now, this is the one that I'm going to look for the name of the local councils in. Well, it won't be possible to find it now, I think, because we are not subscribing to the Times as it wants us to do. Anyway, a miniature short Shetland pony called Patrick was made an unofficial mayor of a Devon village, has been kicked out of the pub garden where he meets his public. And locals suspect, wait for it, horseplay. Horseplay is a colloquial word, meaning that there is something fishy going on, suspicious going on. Last month, Patrick was given a chain of office in the village of Cockington near Torquay in Devon, in a ceremony involving Kevin Foster, the Tory MP for Torbay, and the councillors. It followed a public campaign to recognize the impact he had on the area. Now, this is the council called Torbay. Let's see what there is, and if there is anything in the news about Torbay Council attacking. Torbay is a Tory council, of course. Typical, isn't it? That they should actually kind of attack Patrick instead of appreciating his role and lauding him. This is something that should never happen. So what happened was that the Torbay Council, instead of appreciating and lauding Patrick, because Patrick actually his full-time main job is as a therapy pony. He visits hospitals and he helps people. And instead of lauding him with his latest kind of recognition by the villagers in Coggington, Torbay Council decided to order that Patrick be ousted from the pub, and that if he were to be allowed back in, he would have to be allowed back in only after the pub has carried out changes to its architecture, costing about £2,000 or even more. Now, the piece in the Times says, and piece elsewhere in the Free Street says, that doing the repairs that the Torbay Council wants the horse, let's say, trainer, Toby, it's important. It's important for Torbay Council to realize that the positive attitude that the people signing the petition to up to the point of Torbay Council, up to the point of Patrick being made the official mayor with the official chain. And we shall be coming back to that. We are checking some other facts while we are doing the broadcast. Now that is something that we shall be coming back to in the context of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets and the appearance on the internet, on the general kind of media, of Lutfur Rahman, who had been ousted by an order of the election commissioner Richard Morey, dated the 23rd of April 2015. Now, Lutfur Rahman is being mentioned here. We need to mention this because of the item that we come across yesterday about the passing away of a man called Mark Baines. Mark Baines we have condemned in the past, but we are not going to repeat the words of condemnation now. We condemned Mark Baines and Ted Jury following the appearance of Ted Jury and Mark Baines in front of a so-called committee chaired by a racist now dead called John Pierce. We shall be talking in great detail about John Pierce and the racist committee which was sitting there in the council. After following the lies by Mark Baines praising Tower Hamlets Council, I decided to stand up from the so-called public gallery and go around them and I started taking pictures on my camcorder. The racist idiot, John Pierce, shouted at me, saying that I should not be taking pictures, etc., etc. Now, my rebuttal to the racist John Pierce will be extended and expanded on for the sake of records. Going back to the original publication that Mark Baines kind of started, which was called Love Whopping, it is quite clear that the contents, the editorial contents of the line taken by Mark Baines were quite similar to, not exactly identical, but similar to the agenda and the priorities used by the Labour Party group on Tower Hamlets Council, and also, of course, supported by, in the context, by Peter Golds, who is now the only Conservative councillor on Tower Hamlets Council. Now, most of Fleet Street, in covering the events in Tower Hamlets Council, mainly the corruption by Lutfur Rahman, most of the coverage by Ted Jury and Mark Baines about what was going on in Tower Hamlets under the frontage of Lutfur Rahman, that was very, very stupid, because they were attacking Lutfur Rahman without actually showing or coming across as rigorous, objective, investigative reporter dedicated to the defense of the needs of the local community, which they did not. So this particular broadcast is not going to kind of continue the full discussion about what happened at that meeting, except to say that Mark Baines was not known to me personally until I cited him at that meeting. And years later, when Mark Baines became self-described investigative reporter, he showed his real identity, which is to deny the likes of me in the columns that he published or the pieces that he published. The pieces that Mark Baines published on his lab whopping website, so Mark Baines surfaced in front of me on that July evening in 2015, and as based on his stupidity, absolutely shameless praise of John Beeks and the corruption and the corrupt incumbent in the post, there was no foundation for Mark Baines praising Hrs Council, and yet he did that. So to read in some of the kind of comments posted by a woman that Mark Baines knew well on Mark Baines's blog called the East End Inquirer. All the comments are positive about Mark Baines, which we have no objection to. But there is not a single part in any of the comments that deals with Mark Baines and the so-called community investigative journalism that he styled himself for. Now, there is no evidence. There is no evidence that the council's information commission requirements were in any way responsible for the primary distortion of the files on information commission. And the only reason why Mark Baines would praise the council so early in the kind of period, starting with John Biggs's 11 June 2015 entry into the chamber, entry into the regime as his regime as the elected mayor. There's nobody in the whole during the whole. So the only reason why Mark Baines would praise Hrs Council and John Biggs is to come across as a kind of fan in the stupidest sense of the term of John Biggs and expect the odd invite or the odd tip from Biggs and his supporters. And it's Mark Baines was never seen anywhere near Tower Hamlets Council. Mark Baines was never noted anywhere in the social media, so-called, as being concerned about the lack of democracy, lack of honesty, and the perpetration of cruelty and criminality by John Biggs. And as I have said before, the January, I think the 13th January, or let's say January 2013, debate initiated by Robert Neal, who is styling himself as a former licensed law trader now. And the more Mark Baines praised Town Council officials, the more pleased the stupid, racist liar John Pierce appeared to me. So, with these kind of people, what chance was there for ordinary people in Tower Hamlets to get the service that they deserve and the service they need day to day from the council that belongs to them electorally, belongs to them collectively financially, because of the fact that the central government departments, UK central government departments that do fund the UK central government departments that actually are from time to time known as issuing funds to locally based quote news outlets would be taking note of Mark Baines' ability to the corrupt bureaucracy in Towners Council, and that Mark Baines likewise would get the benefit of his praising the corrupt council, and he would get the benefit from the council itself. But that was early days, because I'm talking about July 2020. Sorry, July 2015, when Mark Baines appeared before the mayor in cabinet sitting, which is a completely bogus sitting. Bogus sitting in terms of the evidence that can be related to and accessed by a permanent kind of individuals. So Mark Baines praised Towners Council, and as did Ted Jury. So what's the difference between Mark Baines and Ted Jury praising Towners Council and John Biggs et al., and the SWP wonkers and the various other variations of the so-called Indian socialists? So Mark Baines never reported on anything wrong being done by John Biggs, nor did Ted Jury. Now, anyone who has been watching our program for any sustained period would know that we don't belong to any of the cabals fronted by John Biggs or the cabal fronted by Luther Rahman. If we have ever been seen near or within the vicinity where Luther Rahman was staging his stunt, so we go back again. So Mark Mark Baines didn't criticize Town Hamlets Council regime fronted by John Biggs, nor did Ted Jury. Now, if any of the wrongs that John Biggs was doing and was being allowed to do without being condemned by Mark Baines and Ted Jury, because Ted Jury and Mark Baines actually condemned Luther Rahman. In fact, they condemned Luther Rahman every day, and they did that as a reflex, so as a mental reflex. They did that as a mental reflex because they wanted to create the capital. By running that particular program, they wanted to create the kind of background capital so that their praise of the corrupt council will be appreciated by the crooks, John Biggs and his cabal. We have to discuss the implication or impact of the census on residents and the related issues. Now go back to the Mark Baines was so careful. Mark Baines was so careful to conceal his identity that he, in his several years of publishing the lab whopping, and the title became changed into East End Enquirer. It seems that Mark Baines, despite the fact that he paraded himself as a community investigative reporter, etc., etc., he lacked basic literacy. Now, the particular package that is going around containing the tablets, I should repeat. What are the issues? All the issues that a so-called investigative local journalism organ should be looking at were being ignored by Mark Baines, as were the same things being ignored by the colleague of his, Ted Jury. We shall come to a conclusion about this later, not necessarily in this edition. The point is that Mark Baines was the one that provided lots of private information to Ajmal Hussain. Ajmal Hussain was the main person that wanted a petition to file against Luther Rahman following the 2014 by-election. In the months that followed, so what has happened in the comments that these people have published, praising Mark Baines to the skies, is that they have lied. And they've done that in a racist way. because they knew that Mark Baines was not reporting on John Biggs in any way that could be compared with the venom that Mark Baines would reserve against a Muslim or a Bangladeshi or an Asian or whatever in the post that Biggs was occupying, while Baines was ignoring Biggs's lies and failures. We shall continue on Mark Baines. Now we move on to an item that has been promoted by quote supporters of Luthu Rahman, to the effect that the road closures, roadblocks that John Biggs created are going to be reviewed by Luthu Rahman. Now that will be reviewed by Luthu Rahman not because there is merit in reviewing the scheme. The scheme is complete bonkers and should never have been brought into operation in any part of Tower Hamlets whatsoever. But that is not why Luthu Rahman is actually doing the reviewing. Luthu Rahman is being advised currently in the new kind of regime that he started following the 5th of May 2022 elections, is that he is not, so far as I can see, Luthu Rahman is not producing as front line kind of faces and propagandists for him some of the crooks and liars and criminals that he put forward. One person is, of course, who's been restored to his employment in Tower Hamlets Council is, of course, Alibor Chowdhury. Alibor Chowdhury, in his hundreds of contacts with me, retailed Luthu Rahman's lies to me, to the effect that Luthu Rahman was 100% a fan of mine, and that anything that I would have said to Luthu Rahman via Alibor Chowdhury himself would be adhered to and would be delivered. Alibor Chowdhury never told the truth. Because if Alibor Chowdhury had told the truth about Luthu Rahman, he would not have told me Alibor Chowdhury retailed to me hundreds of lies by Luthu Rahman. Now, anyone, either in the Navarra media or the Jacobins in the USA, or the SWP wonkers, all of these wonkers have been promoting Luthu Rahman in a way that is not based on the evidence on the ground. All of them have lied and said that Luthu Rahman's return as the elected incumbent in the post of mayor has got some ethical, moral kind of impact and implications, and message saying that Luthu Rahman somehow conveys some moral, ethical message. That is the absolute lie. What Luthu Rahman's election, so-called, on the 5th of May 2022 shows is that in Tower Hamlets, quote, politics, there is no party. I'm not a member of the party, nor am I a supporter of the party. I'm a campaigning observer and witness to the three main parties, which is Lib Dems, whom I call Lib Dums, and the next one is, of course, New. Now, what has happened with the kind of the lying by Mark Baines and the lying by Ted Jury for John Beeks, is that it has created a vacuum, an emptiness in the borough of Tower Hamlets, where there is no real legitimate, reliable source for the individual person that absolutely need urgent help and support during an emergency. There is no such grouping, and there would not be any physically kind of mobile outfit on the standby anyway, because it depends on the particular emergency and the particular circumstances, etc., before an actual emergency team is normally sent to the person in emergency need. So we'll come back to that in due course. And in Tower Hamlets structure, we mentioned in the past, in the structure of Tower Hamlets, and the structure being more corrupt than it had been historically, the fact that the elected mayor is the chief executive in effect, not in name, but chief executive in name, is absolutely not appropriate. Not for the ordinary people, not for the vulnerable, not for the elderly. Because there was this man called Aman Dalby. Now, Dalby, phonetically, I'm explaining, Dalby is a construct derived from Dehlavi. So, Aman Dalby is descended from, or is of the origin, Indian Delhi. Whether he kind of socially traveled straight out of India or Delhi is not known publicly. But the fact that he was appointed shortly after Luther Roman's, quote, first election in October 2010 to the post of mayor, Aman Dalby almost got appointed chief executive of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council. He was stopped, Luther Roman was stopped from appointing Aman Dalby as the chief executive because there were opposition to Aman Dalby from all the quarters. It is like something like what is happening now with Boris Johnson. Apparently, during Tuesday, August the 3rd, Aman Dalby was prevented from being appointed chief executive by a rare event, which is the combined opposition by Peter Gores and the Labour Party of councillors. And some of the items that are published by Mark Baines and Ted Jury against that. Now, that is only peripherally comparable to what's been happening in Tower Hamlets. In Tower Hamlets, In Tower Hamlets, there is absolutely no, as I said, rigorous source of examining or holding to account the councillor concerned, let alone any rigorous effort or process by the existing councillors of holding to account Lutfur Rahman, the incumbent, in the post of mayor. So every single day, Lutfur Rahman kind of fronted the regime, and the frontage was, of course, the post of mayor. Now, in the case of Devon, in the Cockington village in Devon, where the Shetland pony has been appointed mayor, so what they did in Tower Hamlets in the first kind of period that Lutfur Rahman set up a so-called administration was for Lutfur Rahman to stuff his administration with serial offenders and liars and crooks. And he embarked with brazen lack of care. He embarked on kind of benefiting people that he kind of needed to reward for their role in getting him installed in the post of mayor. And none of these things were really discussed during the evidence before Richard Morey. Consequently, Richard Morey's ruling, which is extensive in its repetition of the legality based underlying his ruling and his attitude and his outlook. And that shows that Morey took an opportunistic disinterest in the welfare and the well-being and the needs of the people of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. While he appeared keen to leave a legacy of him that he was following the law to the highest standard. Well, he might have done that and he might have been, quote, technically correct. And he was correct to condemn Lutfur Rahman based on the evidence that he did see. But it is astonishing that Morey has not been speaking after repeated decision by the London Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police and anybody else in the authorities in the local kind of state structure. All of them have said that Lutfur Rahman was found to be dishonest, a crook, but that he was not a criminal. That is basically what they have actually told the public. People who have done thousands of crimes that Lutfur Rahman is actually accused of and has been found guilty of in terms of the proceedings before Richard Morey have been sent to prison and have been fined, and their physical, material, social lives have been destroyed. But Lutfur Rahman has escaped all of those. Not only has he escaped all of those, but he has been allowed to stage a so-called comeback, which is a mirage, which is not what it looks it is. And the mirage and the comeback will be discussed extensively by us in due course, of course. The first thing that it does expose and draw attention on and focus on is the fragmentation, the destruction, the disintegration of the so-called Labour Party that was supposedly fronted by John Biggs, the racist liar. There never was, absolutely never was, one single occasion during Lutfur Rahman's 6 years when either Mark Baines or Ted Jury took a look at how extensive and how brazenly corrupt Lutfur Rahman's decision making was day to day. If they had done that, then Mori would have come to a tougher decision than he did. Mori didn't come to a tough decision. Mori came to a minimalist decision and kicked out Lutfur Rahman from his post and kicked out Alibor Chaudhry as an example from Alibor Chaudhry's post. Both of them, Lutfur Rahman deserved to be banned for life from public office, and Alibor Chaudhry too. And since the return of, quote, the Labour Party at the 11 June 2015 so-called election, none of the four petitioners, and we make an exception about Debbie Simmons, that we don't count her, because she had difficulty working with the main kind of self-publicized petitioner, Andy Arlam. Arlam was completely unreliable, disrespectful, and deeply ignorant and stupid. We shall come to that when we discuss again the stupid piece fronted by David Grossman and broadcast on the BBC Newsnight program on the 19th of May 2022. Although it was a BBC platform, David Grossman behaved just like the SWP Wonkers and the Navara media and the Jacobins morons in the USA in praising and lauding Lutfur Rahman's acumen, etc., etc. In the period after he was ousted by Richard Mori in April 2015, Lutfur Rahman or his sponsors staged appeals or applications seeking to outdo, overturn, set aside, whatever, the ruling by Richard Mori. And on every single one of those occasions, at least a good 5 applications made by Lutfur Rahman or on behalf of Lutfur Rahman. The ruling given by the High Court, where the so-called appeals were lodged, the rulings showed the court's rejection of Lutfur Rahman. That means that everything that Richard Mori said about Lutfur Rahman being dishonest, unreliable, untruthful, stays on the record. Yes? So if anyone makes a claim that Lutfur Rahman was innocent, and that Lutfur Rahman was not found guilty, and Lutfur Rahman was not prosecuted as a criminal because he is innocent. He is, of course, obliged to explain why, not once, but at least 5 times, various judges in the High Court refused to accept that Mori was wrong at law, because that is what happens in the system of court bureaucracy in the country, in this jurisdiction. An appeal is only tenable. An appeal can be sustained, or an appeal can be entertained, not on the grounds of the details of the evidence, but strictly on the grounds, and only on the grounds, if the appellate court or the appellate forum finds that the court or the forum or the tribunal being appealed against made an error in law or an error at law. So what follows is that when the judges, all of them, rejected Lutfur Rahman's application, what that means in legal terms is that they all of them were endorsing Richard Mori's labeling of Lutfur Rahman as a liar, as somebody who is dishonest, as somebody who is very selfish and very greedy and obsessed about his own personal interests and gains. This is not the image of Lutfur Rahman that came across during the David Grossman grossly stupid piece, aired, dated the 19th of May 2022. Grossman is an idiot. Grossman, as I said, like their socialist wonkers, is a white, subliberal racist, patronizing the likes of Lutfur Rahman. There was nothing in the community, and there is nothing in the community since. That is, when I took a look at the building, the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, which is already kind of labeled as the town hall, and I looked at the people walking in the Whitechapel sort of market outside the Whitechapel tube station, I could not find any evidence. I could not find any evidence. I mean, that happened on Tuesday, the 2nd of August. I could not find any evidence of an existing campaign about this new disaster that Lutfur Rahman is now adding to the community, because this building, the Whitechapel Hospital, is too close to the East London Mosque. And the proximity of these two buildings means that there will be too much going on off the record, but internally, between the so-called town hall, council town hall, and the East London Mosque. Now, the East London Mosque is the vehicle, one of the vehicles that has been used by the London Metropolitan Police boss Ian Blair when he was in post. Because Ian Blair came to a written agreement, a deal with one of the main individuals involved in the complex, in the controlling of the complex called the East London Mosque, the London Muslim Centre, and an organization that apparently has been changed from the IFE into something else. Now, if the contents of the television program presented on dispatches on the Channel 4 platform on the 1st of March 2010 by Andrew Gilligan, if Andrew Gilligan's thesis is accepted, and his thesis is more or less similar to the thesis pursued in that context by Ted Jury, that the East London Mosque, the IFE, and the London Muslim Centre were effectively controlled by people that were known in Bangladesh as the Jamaat-e Islami, and that they were, these people, sympathetic with some of the most extreme, violent, anti-Western elements and agitators, some of whom had been given direct or satellite or online platform by the collection of people at the East London Mosque or the IFE or the London Muslim Centre. If that is the case, that these are people that are not kind of to be trusted by the British establishment, then how is it that no less than the incumbent at the time, top boss of the London Metropolitan Police was coming in a series of agreements with these people? This is a question. We don't have the time in terms of the length of time available to a program like this to discuss and examine all the nitty-gritty, all the details, particulars involved about these two contradictions. Because the London Muslim Centre, the East London Mosque, and the IFE, whatever the IFE may be called these days, collectively, and in terms of their agenda and the narrative and the public stance, can be treated as being in a singular place the most, in terms of power, the exercise in decision making, most influential segment of what can be described as the Muslim demography in Britain. Muslim in a loose, objective sense of the term, not Muslim in a fanatical, extremist sense of the term. So these people have been praised by the socialist wonkers and the Novara media and the Jacobins and their likes. And the idiot David Grossman grossly failed to examine any of this. What Grossman grossly did was to retail a very stupid conservative member of the House of Peers, Hayward. Now, Hayward is not a very intelligent individual with any depth of understanding of society. What he was doing was relaying things that he had kind of harvested from here, there, and everywhere. And he was being given the platform by the Daily Mail because he was a member of the House of Peers. How disgraceful that is. Not because of the quality of the information or the content of what he was publicizing or publishing. So we are just doing a time check. How long have we been on air? This recording began 1 hour, 10 minutes ago. So we shall continue up to probably 2 hours. Because I need to get into this grossly stupid BBC Newsnight thing that the grossly idiotic David Grossman put on the record. That particular edition of Newsnight was fronted by Victoria Derbyshire. Now, Victoria Derbyshire, compared to others on the BBC like Emily Maitlies and others, comes across as, compared to those ones, more informed and so on. But that's where I shall end that comparison. But otherwise, she's not really carrying out what is often ascribed to or attributed to the man called John Reith. John Reith is supposed to have actually publicized the theme that the BBC apparently kind of follows. The BBC is ethically in a morass, and the BBC has hardly broken a story, really, that makes the difference. So anyone who would be doing a program on the Newsnight slot about the election on 5th of May 2022, which saw the, quote, return of Lutheraman to the post of mayor and the, quote, takeover of the council by a majority of Lutheraman's so-called party. I say so-called party because Lutheraman has no real permanent party. Lutheraman was recruited by a member of the Labour Party who found that Lutheraman was a tool being used for brainwashing by elements based in the East London Mosque. These are not my words. These are words that are on the record, put on the record by Abbas Uddin Elias Halal. So Lutheraman has had various, quote, parties at various times. Each time he creates a new party, he has been forced to do so because the previous form of his so-called party was found to have been totally ridiculous and completely without any impact on the quality of democracy or quality of the people concerned. So currently it's Aspire, but this is a name he must have stolen from the name that I created in a campaign that still has outstanding claims against the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council. And the email address that we used for the program is Aspire Educate. That was dated July 2015. So Lutheraman has to be quizzed about where he got the name Aspire. Because Aspire Educate sent to Tower Hamlets Council's crooks literally thousands of emails. Most of them should have been brought to the attention of Lutheraman, who was still in place during the kind of period, even after the end of his tenure, because the crooks that were imposed, many of them were in contact with him, or vice versa. Where did they get the name Aspire? Neither Lutheraman nor any of his cabal is known as a linguistic originator, even in the Siloti language, let alone in English, and let alone in a sophisticated word like aspire. Now, there is nothing, no record of aspire anywhere else. And I'm the author of literally thousands of new words and new phrases. Everyone who can thoroughly investigate the record can see that. So aspire, although it is called aspire, it has no aspiration at all. It has absolutely no aspiration to tell the truth. It has absolutely no aspiration to support the needs of the people in Tower Hamlets. And it is grossly stupid of David Grossman on the BBC to have relied on the quotations from Richard Morey and some quotation from this Tory conservative member of the House of Peers called Hayward. And Grossman had absolutely no observation to make of his own. When he showed this Andy Arlam made a typically stupid, contradictory set of words. He said that he would not do it again. What Grossman was asking idiotically was, would he file a petition against Luthu Rahman again? And Andy Arlam said he won't do it. Then Grossman said, or in the context, the question was, did Arlam regret doing the petition against Luthu Rahman in the first place, which was, I think, filed in June 2014, and Arlam said he did not regret it. What's the point? What is the point of either of those two stupid statements? If he didn't regret it, logically he should have said he would do it again. Because if he didn't regret it, it meant that he still believed or harbored some belief, at least, that the purpose he claimed at the time underlying his agreement to become a petitioner, that those grounds were still persisting, still were sustained and were prevailing. Because when Luthu Rahman said to Navara media idiots that he lost everything, or he said to the Jacobin idiots that he lost everything, Luthu Rahman lied. Because Luthu Rahman hadn't lost anything. But the fact that those idiots at Navara media or the Jacobins had the temerity to assume that in Tower Hamlets no one existed who knew the truth about Luthu Rahman being a liar while he was in post. As we have said before, Luthu Rahman abused the council's resources in hiring taxis on too many occasions. And he did hire too many left-wing racist morons as his advisors. Imagine, if they were intelligent, they would never allow him to be such a brazen defier of morality and ethics and to come across such a brazenly dishonest individual as described by Richard Morey. So those advisors were themselves in need of serious advice about ethics and morality and integrity. That shows that Luthu Rahman was indeed brainwashed, as he has been described by Abbas Uddin Elias Halal. And Abbas Uddin Elias Halal should know Luthu Rahman, whether he is brainwashable or not, because Abbas Uddin Elias Halal brainwashed Luthu Rahman himself. Now there is another member of the Labour Party who was a councillor also in Tower Hamlets. And he said to me that Luthu Rahman is a very, very bad state. And he came to him for help. And that is a person called Halalur Rahman or Halal Rahman. So these are people that exist in Tower Hamlets. Halal is a student of my students, if you like, because he joined the Progressive Youth Organization long after I had finished the 7-year action program with the boys that they later became converted into progressive youth organization. They were converted into the progressive youth organization as a result of a policy decision made somewhere in Whitehall, because they knew, the Whitehall bureaucracy knew that what I was doing with these boys by defending the community and teaching them was a bad thing for racism and bad thing for corrupting society. So they sent an operative called John Newbegin. And John Newbegin dedicated his time, as was instructed, to taking these boys away from the commitment that I had actually ingrained in them or organized them in, and launched them as a progressive youth organization. There is nothing, no record, no trace left of their progress there now. Now, going back to Halal Rahman wrote a series of articles in the Bangla language outlet called Shurma. And the idea was to write about the progressive youth organization. And he spoke to me and he wrote up to the point certain facts. But when it came to the work that I did from the start in 1973 up to 1980, suddenly that article in the Shurma ceased publication. And when I asked Halal Rahman why, he smiled and he said he would tell me later. Now that is more than I think 12 years, 15 years ago. And Halal Rahman has yet to tell me why that happened. But he didn't have to kind of assume that I needed him to tell me. There are too many crooks in Tower Hamlets, too many criminals in Tower Hamlets community that are feeding off the ordinary people by all kinds of pretense. One of the pretense is the spiritual obligation that Maulana Shamsul Haq, no relation of mine, was openly, embarrassingly accused of during the proceedings before Richard Morey. Here it goes. As published, and I give due credit to Ted Jury at the time, he was publishing the transcripts, and of course he was being held by the conservatives in his course and his access, etc. But the transcripts were made available at cost significantly. It costs quite a lot of money to produce transcripts at any time, but that time Ted Jury did a service. He shared on his Twitter and blog some of the transcripts, and it was absolutely fantastic from factual standpoint. The one transcript contained the reference to the interrogation of Maulana Shamsul Haq. Now, anyone who knows Tower Hamlets and knows the East London Mosque and the Ford Square Mosque and has come across this Maulana Shamsul Haq, even at that time during the 2014 election, Maulana Shamsul Haq, who is younger than me but has got kind of gray hair, prematurely gray, I think, and he looks like a much older sage than he is. In any case, Maulana Shamsul Haq was accused by the petitioners against Lutfur Rahman that he, Maulana Shamsul Haq, during the 2014 so-called mayoral election in Tower Hamlets, had given a, quote, lecture to potential kind of voters, using words to the effect that it was there, the voters, potential voters, spiritual duty to vote for Luther Rahman. Now, that is something that Richard Morey actually referred to. Well, he was referring to the history of the electoral corruption and relevant legislation, etc. And he mentioned the Irish community, I think, or part of the Irish community and part of the church, either is a Christian, Catholic, or Anglican. I don't want to specify because I'm not reading anything from any document in front of me. I'm only speaking from general memory. So you can check the actual factual references and correct if I have made any error or mistake in this particular edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable. So when the petitioners against Luther Rahman submitted the evidence to the effect that Maulana Shamsul Haque, a supporter of Luther Rahman, enjoined on his kind of group or rally or followers or worshippers, he said that it was their spiritual duty to cast their votes for Luther Rahman only. So this was very strongly put before Richard Morey by the representative of the petitioners. And consequently, this was featured during the proceedings. So when this denial, Maulana Luther Rahman denied that he had ever done that he had ever said any such thing, that voting for Luther Rahman was their spiritual duty. By there, of course, we are all referring to the Muslim ones. Because Luther Rahman is a mayor in Tower Hamlets solely and mainly by exploiting the votes of the Muslim component of the demography in the electorate. Luther Rahman is not a particularly religious or faithful individual in his personal behavior, in his character. But he is not reluctant to use or exploit the apparent Muslim affiliations that exist among the people. And this is helped. That is to say, this is a function, that is a product, a consequence of the ongoing operation of racism against the Muslim population generally. All these factors have conspired to make it a point that a candidate such as Luther Rahman, who is from Bangladesh, who is a Muslim and who comes from Silot, will get significant support from the community. But Shamsul Haque, in his reported kind of preaching, made it worse for the case by Luther Rahman, case in defense by Luther Rahman. Because when this alleged misbehavior by him, illegal behavior by Shamsul Haque, was put to Shamsul Haque, Maulana is the title given to somebody who is supposed to be an Islamic scholar. Hello? Come back half an hour. So, what happened was that I'm dropping the Maulana from the name because based on his behavior, Shamsul Haque doesn't deserve to be addressed with respect. So when this alleged sermon illegal sermon was put to Shamsul Haq, he bluntly denied ever saying what he was being accused of having said. Now, what he didn't realize was that there were recordings of what he said, either video or audio. So the recording or recordings were played to him as he was denying having done that, having said that. So when he convinced himself that he did indeed remember saying those words or doing that kind of entreaties, he said in a stated statement of irony, which would put some of the most craftiest ironic writers and thinkers under pressure of competition. He said if the recordings or if the recording say or says what I supposedly said, then I must have said it. How stupid. He knew, Shamsul Haq knew all along that he would have said it. And what I'm saying happened on the 5th of May this year is exactly that. Not that they were stupid enough to publicly get caught saying to people that, look, Lutfur Rahman is our man. The Muslims have no other hope, etc., other garbage. Because David Grossman is such an idiot. He didn't even inquire as to how Lutfur Rahman, who was branded as a dishonest liar, managed to stage this comeback, not only unseating John Biggs, but also getting this so-called Aspire party to outdo the Labour Party's existing seats. There was no mystery. This was the mystery. The spiritual influence is very much alive and kicking the Labour Party back into place. And Grossman, the idiot, should have inquired as to why this happened. And Andy Arlam, such a complete racist, when sitting outside the Mulberry Place Tower Hamlets Council's so-called town hall, I was trying to get some information from him. He was waiting there for, and he said to me that he didn't know who I was. Now, how do you begin to approach that? I'm the most well-known activist going over decades in so many respects. And this moron who surfaced into our hamlets not long ago says that he didn't know who I was. Now, such an idiot was hailed as the leader, the ordinary people's leader against Lutfur Rahman's corruption. No way. He was only recruited because he didn't have the cash to fund the necessary kind of deposit requirement. He didn't have the cash. The man who did have the cash, the restaurant owner, Azmal Hussain, didn't have the, let's say, other materials to substantiate his kind of claim against Lutfur Rahman. So what he did, somehow they networked, and Andy Arlam and Azmal Hussain got together with this woman from UKIP, Nigel Farage's party. The only one who was genuine in her petition was Debbie Simmons. But Simmons soon tired of the three, especially Arlam, and she quit She didn't quit from formal association with the petition, but she refused to have anything to do with Arlam and so on. So when Arlam said that he didn't know who I was, now it is not that I need Arlam or anybody else to know who I am. That is not the basis on which I do the campaign, the work, the action. If he didn't know who I was, then of course he was more stupid than words could explain. Because all the key issues, ethics, morality, democracy, accountability, transparency, all of those are issues that I have been leading campaigns on. So anyone who cares about any of those should have been aware of the campaigns and aware of me. That is the point. So if he didn't know me, then he was dead. That is mentally dead, not physically dead, but he was mentally dead and ethically dead, and he was a absolute racist. So I told him that he didn't know me because he was a racist in absolute denial. I told him to his face, this Arlam. Now, Arlam said to Grossman that he would not do it again, but also that he didn't regret doing the petition against Luther Rahman in 2014. So what about Azmal Hussain? Private conversation that Azmal Hussain has had with many private individuals whom I shall not name have confirmed that Azmal Hussain only wanted Luther Rahman to apologize to him, Azmal Hussain that is, for the council or some of Luther Rahman's supporters going to Brick Lane and putting some kind of paint or something on a wall that belonged to one of Azmal Hussein's restaurant buildings or something like that. It wasn't too serious, it wasn't damaging, it wasn't really damaging, but Azmal Hussain felt kind of he was insulted by Luther Rahman. And the reason why Azmal Hussain felt Luther Rahman had insulted him, Azmal Hussain, was because up to that incident, according to these sources that have told me this repeatedly on several separate occasions, Azmal Hussain was a fan of the mayor system. Whether it was Luther Rahman or whoever, didn't really matter. It was because Azmal Hussain has a longing, a yearning, a craving to be seen with a mayor or somebody who is in a court position. That is the explanation as to why Azmal Hussain is not against the mayor system. Because on the 23rd of April 2015, in that pub opposite the High Court, there was a so-called news conference where Azmal Hussain and Andy Arlam and this UKIP woman appeared before the court press. And it was Azmal Hussain that declared at that event that from now on, Tower Hamlets has no corruption. How stupid can that be? Of course, there was corruption. And Azmal Hussain was part of the corruption that was continued then and has continued since. Because Azmal Hussain stuck to wherever he stuck to behind the diminutive John Biggs. At a gathering in June 2016 about the murder of Shiblu Rahman, I was standing taking the pictures of the gathering. And Azmal Hussain came, and as he headed towards the place where there was a chair near John Biggs, he brushed past me. he physically brushed past me without saying sorry. I'm putting this on the record as evidence of all of that, and also as a notice that I'll be asking Azmal Hussain why he did that. Because in the subsequent statement that Azmal Hussain made at that gathering, he made a most phenomenally stupid statement about the Ian Mikado School. Now, Ian Mikado School was in the kind of news temporarily at that time because Ted Jury had been given a kind of piece by somebody that I know, but I won't name. And he then managed to get that as an item on the Independent online about the fact that one of the killers of Shibli Rahman had long been employed at this school, and nobody has taken any notice of words to that effect. And factors that had been responsible for placing that piece in the Independent mobilized, and there was this meeting at the Micro Business Center where I was standing, and Azmal Hussain brushed past me. Azmal Hussain should never brush past me. He has no locus. He absolutely will not have any locus to do as he did. Azmal Hussain has done nothing in the community to defend the community. He arrived from Sweden and he owes the Swedish authorities hundreds of thousands of pounds equivalent of or more because he defaulted and he didn't pay the tax or whatever. And he admitted the dodging of the tax. He is on the record as having admitted the dodging of the tax when he appeared before Richard Morey. I'm not making it up. I would not make up, and I would never have to make up anything. The evidence that I have is enough, more than enough. Overwhelming evidence I have is enough. So that is the reason why Andy Arlam was not fit as a genuine petitioner, nor was Azmal Hussain, nor indeed was anybody else except Debbie Simmons, of course, but Debbie didn't have the money. So there needed to be a framework of a pretense that somebody with the money had the requisite bank accounts. I mean, nobody lost any money really. These people only were required to put in evidence that they had the money in the bank account, and the money in the bank account that was accepted by the court system, which is corrupt, absolutely corrupt, was Azmal Hussain. Now, if Azmal Hussain was against corruption, then when John Biggs, immediately after taking over as the mayor after the 11th of June 2015, John Biggs announced that he was going to reward every single councillor with an obscene increase for no reason. Azmal Hussain have denounced him. Instead, Azmal Hussain, by the time John Biggs was ousted on the 5th of May 2022, Azmal Hussain became one of John Biggs's most loyal servants, providing food and providing other things, just like he had been very loyal to George Galloway and the particular band of Galloway's parasites. I don't include Carol in that. Carol is not a parasite, but the others with John Biggs that went to Azmar Hussein's restaurant on the basis that they were friends or chums of George Galloway were all parasites. Well, Carol Swords and our friend who is passed away, those two are not parasites. Now, I accepted invitation to have a meal once or twice in Ajmal Hussein's restaurant because I was present at meetings and everyone else was eating. And if I didn't eat, instead of them understanding the morality, they would think that I was kind of undermining, underestimating them or something. That is the reason why I agreed to eat. My general principle is that I don't eat at other people's places precisely because of the moral compromise. So I, at one time, not long after George Galloway came out of the Big Brother house, and I went to have a meeting with him in Brick Lane, and that meeting involved George Galloway, some of his parasites, sitting on a table and discussing the events. Those events were about the Khoodeelaar campaign against Crossrail. So the parasites that were there with George Galloway and had meals at Azmar Hussein's restaurant, those parasites have gone. They haven't gone physically. Some of them have dislocated, or located or moved around. But politically, those parasites are absolutely dead, absent, in denial, as badly in denial as George Galloway himself has been. Remember what happened to George Galloway? Politically, domestically in the UK, George Galloway became a Brexiteer. Not only that, George Galloway became a fan of nasty Nigel Farage. So much so that when the issue became an issue at Peterborough by-election, George Galloway literally publicly begged Nigel Farage to let him, George Galloway, become the Nigel Farage party's candidate to challenge the Labour Party candidate. I mean, the degeneration of George Galloway politically, knows no bounds. So when George Galloway, going back a bit, when George Galloway appeared at the Water Lily Centre in November 2014, along with Ken Lying Still Livingston, George Galloway made an obscene claim to the effect that he, George Galloway, had been responsible for paving the way for, wait for it, quote, Bengalis to have an MP. I have discussed this many times before, so I'm not going to repeat the length of the discussion, except to say that George Galloway, in making such a claim, showed what an ignorant racist he was. Despite the fact that he got many mentions as a outstanding parliamentarian, Galloway showed total ignorance of Parliament and parliamentary system. And he showed total ignorance of his own appearances, career-saving appearances over a period of several years, when he attended events organized by the Khoodeelaar campaign and basically gave accurate recognition of the Khoodeelaar campaign's role. In Tower Hamlets, when the community's response to the murder of Altawali was channeled away from opposing racism by collection of individuals who wanted to exploit the community's, quote, awareness to become, quote, councillors, Bengali councillors, as they said. At the 1990 council election in Tower Hamlets, the largest number of Bangladeshi-based or Bangladeshi origin candidates became councillors for the first time. George Galloway, in 1990, where was he? He was nowhere. Wherever he was not somebody that had any connection with Tower Hamlets and vice versa. How did all these Bangladeshi councillors become councillors? Answer is that it was mainly the votes mobilized of the Bangladeshi people in the electorate that voted for them and they voted them in. Similarly, Galloway, when he was deployed in Tower Hamlets after the fact that the Daily Telegraph paid him a lot of money, which he then was able to use to stage a comeback to the House of Commons as a member of Parliament after the humiliating way that Tony Blair had treated him by kicking him out of the Labour Party. Galloway would never get elected back ever to the House of Commons after that, had it not been for the votes of the Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets. And that is something that doesn't need a long discussion. It's so obvious. And yet Galloway made that stupid claim. And he did that while Lutfur Rahman sat near him. It didn't even occur to Lutfur Rahman that Galloway was making a completely stupid statement, insulting the whole community. So, as I said before, Lutfur Rahman is not very clever, and he was amenable to brainwashing, as Abbasuddin Elias Halal told the National Labour Party National Executive Committee in September 2010. The dossier, the Abbasuddin Halal or Elias Halal dossier against Lutfur Rahman. So that was Galloway being stupid at the Water Lily Centre in November 2014. And not long apart from that statement of idiocy, racist idiocy and stupidity, ingratitude from the racist George Galloway, was Ken Livingstone Livingstone making another stupid remark by assuming that the people present at the gathering would not only endorse it, but were predicted by him to be grateful that he could make such a statement. Words to the effect that lying still Livingstone said whether commissioners, the commissioners that Eric Pickles, in the post at that time as the community secretary, the commissioners that Pickles had announced or had sent to quote take over Tower Hamlets Council should be targeted by you, that is the perceived supporters of Luther Roman. Now, these people are not perceived supporters at all. These people are spiritually influenced, misguided people who had been gathered there despite the fact that their political knowledge was absolutely zero. Average individual present there contained political understanding of society to a point of zero. There were few, but the overwhelming majority of those people who present there lacked basic political understanding or basic understanding about the electoral system, about the local councils, about the parliamentary election, etc., etc., etc. They're only guided as a group by spiritual influencers. And there are too many spiritual influencers operating in the East End of London by abusing their bases at or connections with the key decision makers who abuse their links with the mosque committees. So those people were assumed by Ken Livingstone to be idiots. So Livingstone proceeded to say, go outside these commissioners' homes and demonstrate. Now, Livingstone never, ever lived in Tower Hamlets, and Livingstone is an idiot. There is no record, absolutely no record ever, of the Siloti-speaking Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets doing anything like that on any cause whatsoever. Even in 1971, when my own father was organizing the people, he was not the only one, but he was a leading organizer for the cause of Bangladesh in 1971, and he held meetings in New Road, in our house in New Road, every single day around the clock. Even that time, they didn't. Neither my father nor any of the other people that he mobilized went to anyone's house, any politician of whatever description, to agitate. They went the maximum distance or the maximum extremity or extremism or extreme kind of length they went to was to go to Hyde Park and attend the various rallies that took place in Hyde Park in support of Bangladesh in 1971. So for Ken Livingstone to say as if these were some brainwashable lambs, go and agitate. How dare the racist criminal? Nobody went to anywhere near the commissioners or anywhere. There were not a mass of commissioners. One is a commissioner. Ken Knight is a liar and a crook. He was a fire brigade man. And the other is Mark Collar, whose most recent bribery thing has been at Liverpool after the Joe Anderson scandal. These were corrupt individuals themselves, just as corrupt as Eric the Pickles. So what you are hearing about is that this is a unique world exclusive analysis and description and report about Tower Hamlets concerning and exposing layers and layers and layers of crooks, criminals, liars, and morons. I mean, nobody would even know, nobody among those people that Livingstone excitedly kind of told to go and demonstrate, they would not have any clue. They would need brainwashing, guidance, and guided tour to go wherever these people lived, and it doesn't matter. It never mattered. These commissioners, Mark, Khoodeelaar and Knight in particular, those two became like, what is it called? These websites that are run for featuring pornographic kind of images. They were looking at one of the Labour Party councillors during meetings as if she was one of those pornographic models, and they were kind of very frustrated that they couldn't do any more than just look at her. These morons did not even speak audibly. I sat right behind Peter Golds, and I couldn't even hear what he was saying. He was saying anything. These when the commissioners materialized, and the commissioners didn't find anything, didn't disclose anything that amounted to their discovery or finding of corruption in Tower Hamlets, because they were themselves crooks, as was Pickles, as was the terms of reference, whatever. And Tower Hamlets Council is no better in July 2022 than it was in November 2014. And that is where I had addressed, before I created the email address Aspire Educate, I used other email addresses to communicate to these criminals, Mark Khoodeelaar and Ken Knight, about what on earth they were doing, making the visits to the council. What were they looking at, and what were they finding? These crooks lied. So I sent them literally hundreds of emails, and altogether I sent to the Tower Hamlets Council thousands of emails. There is no evidence anywhere that the commissioners found anything wrong in the council. Anything wrong that is actually identifiable as wrong in the ordinary sense. So what were they appointed for? And why did the liar Ken Lyings to Livingstone tell the gathered rally in the Water Lily Centre that they should go and agitate against the commissioners? As the Torbay Council has shown, it has banned the only legitimate mayor, Patrick the Shetland Pony. It has banned Patrick from visiting the pub where he used to meet his public. Any good that happens locally by an innocent character is the one that is targeted by the crooks in the local community, local council. That is what happens. So when Roxana fears in next door neighbor was being promoted by criminals in Fleet Street because they like the idea. They cannot have enough of this tag, Muslim woman, in active politics. These morons really are fetishists, stupid idiots. They think that a woman like Ruxana Fiers, who has got a biological, ethnic background, social background of being a Muslim background, is a revolution in itself. I mean, Malala Yousafzai. We shall talk about Malala Yousafzai and her unstoppable promotion by the Western anti-Muslim morons. That doesn't mean that Yousafzai herself is anti-Muslim, but they have seized on her being injured and they have promoted her. I mean, Nobel Prize at the age of what, 12 or something. Don't be ridiculous. That is the extent of absurdity of the anti-Muslim morons worldwide. Why would they rush to give her a Nobel Prize only for being injured? Because looking at the antiques of the parasite from Portugal, who is in post as the incumbent in the post of Secretary General of the United Nations, second term he has bagged himself. What does this parasite amount to? This parasite is a preacher. The United Nations is not a preaching organization, you moron. The United Nations was founded. The United Nations was founded at a time very critical for humanity. And it was founded to stop massacres and genocides. The parasite from Portugal has not done anything to prevent any of the massacre. There are social media posts that actually do insult. They insult the hundreds of millions of people who are victims of the failures of the United Nations organization. So can lie still living? So let's find the thing. If I can find the thing, what was he saying to the people in the Water Lily Center? So this was held on the 12th of November 2014 from 6 to 8 p.m. And the speakers listed there were Ken Lying Still Livingstone. Lying Still is not there, but I am adding is George Galloway MP, Steve Turner from the United Union, Christine Shawcroft, Kate Hudson, Alex Kenny, he was a local teacher, Lindsay German, who is an SWP, and Shabi Dalu. Shabi Dalu is a kind of is an ethnicity linked woman that has been promoted by the Ken Livingstone type of thingy. And this is the heading of the leaflet. It says, emergency meeting, stop the witch hunt of Lutfur Rahman. What on earth were they talking about? There absolutely was no witch hunt of Lutfur Rahman. Lutfur Rahman was abusing the post of mayor in Tower Hamlets. And he did abuse that from the beginning. Now, whoever wrote this was a liar, or whoever wrote this, if there were more than one person, lied. And this is the funny thing, there is the word Bricklane E1 prominently coming across under the waterline of the leaflet. That is a criminal deception by Lutfur Rahman, because on the 22nd of October 2004, I organized and held a demonstration outside the building that was used by it's a council-owned building at the corner of the Greater X Street. And that day, 22nd of October 2004, was the day when the local councillors were due to hold their surgery, or at least one of the two local councillors was due to hold their surgery. That is the reason why we organized the demonstration, timed it at 6 o'clock on 22nd of October 2004. And the reason why we did that was to highlight the fact that neither of the local councillors supposedly representing the Brick Lane area was there in the council supporting the campaign that the Khoodeelaar campaign started to oppose the digging of the Crossrail hole. So this is the Water Lily Center leaflet, and this was held on the 12th of November. And 12th of November is the date, significantly, 8 days since Eric Pickles himself had spoken in the House of Commons. And that was after the publication of the Price Waterhouse report. Now, we shall be dealing with the Price Waterhouse report in due course, not in this edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, but because too much information was left out of the Price Waterhouse report. But then again, too much information was already included as well. And nobody has actually publicly examined item by item what the Price Waterhouse report actually found against Lutfur Rahman's behavior as the mayor, while all these financial decisions were being made corruptly, unaccountably, dishonestly. and without any regard to the spiritual influence whatsoever. It was corruption throughout. So, against that background, when Livingstone, lying still Livingstone, and Galloway arrived at the 12th of November 2014 meeting at the Water Lily Center, they arrived with the pretension, carrying the pretension that here was Luther Rahman, who was a defender of Brick Lane, who was being the target of witch hunt. Witch hunt by who? I mean, anyone watching this from another planet will know that all these characters that I have been depicting and I have been kind of diagnosing, each one in their own particular kind of behavior is dysfunctional, was dysfunctional. Eric Pickles is a notoriously dysfunctional individual. But because he was in post at the time of community secretary, that is the department that actually was linked to, quote, supervising the local councils. I mean, whatever he did a most kind of thoroughly scripted propaganda spiel. That's it. He didn't follow up. Nor did the commissioners, the liars, Ken Knight and Mark Collard, the criminal. Nor did the Labour Party, the so-called opposition. Nor did those morons who were later to emerge as the petitioners. And that was 2014. And what is the now? 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20. 8 years on, none of those issues has been examined, diagnosed, and none of the questions that were raised by the corruption of Luther Rahman, by Luther Rahman of the council, has been raised and discussed or diagnosed or updated. We shall be doing all of those in due course, of course. So this is now 2 hours and 20 minutes at 0041 25 GMT and 41 minutes after 1 British Standard Time. We are ending this particular broadcast of the Khoodeelaar television channel.